What's up, everybody? Welcome to a new deck tech. Try and throw out a little metagame adventure there for you. I know Worlds is still going on, but right now we got Paulo versus Marcio. I think they're on game 2 or 3, not quite sure, but still pretty good stuff. So ever since the Worlds came out, the showcase especially on MTGA, the whole ladder has changed. I mean, like, everything has changed. You're basically playing Jet Sky Fires, Red Deck Wins. You're playing against the Timur. You're basically playing against everything that we see here, right? So everything that you see here is now everything that you find on ladder. There are a few odds and ends of other stuff out there. You still hit some Doom Foretold. You still hit a few more Juns. We only have Peter, playing the one solo Jun deck in here, and you still hit some Doom Foretold decks in the ladder, but for the most part, this is what you're seeing. You're seeing Timur Reclamation, you're seeing Red Deck Wins, you're seeing Blue-White Control, Jet Sky Fires, and then to some extent you're seeing Gruul, Mono Green, and Timur Clovers. Now, this always happens around this time of year, this time of these events. Everybody kind of switches over, they net deck, and this is just kind of what you're going to have to fight against. I had the same things happening over and over every time that I played Arena and I was trying to climb the ladder, and it gets frustrating. So today, I think we're going to talk about the one deck that I find that works really well against all of this, and it's also a Pioneer port. So in Pioneer and Modern, we have Niv Mizzet Reborn actually taking down some tournaments and doing some amazing stuff. I think it can very much match up against all of the things that are going on in Standard. I just don't think we found the right build for it yet. So I've been beating this down people's throat, trying to tell everybody that everything you can pack inside this deck will actually counter the meta, and especially after something like Worlds, where we have 5 decks basically that we need to fight, and then some few outliers. So I'm going to do my best to talk about this deck in depth, try and give you a magical Christmas land idea of what can happen, and then give you an actual idea of what's happening. I'm currently using this to climb as high as I can in the ladder, just to see where I can get with it. When I do ladder, I definitely do multiple decks that I like to think I can get there with. I don't do too much ladder climb, but I usually pick 3 or 4 decks and try and get there based off what's being played for the day. So don't take this as this is going to be a win all, beat all, take down everything that you've seen at Worlds and just like stomp face. But what it is a rogue deck that can come in and actually take out these decks. It has a good chance pre-sideboard and post-sideboard against all these decks, and should post-sideboard have better games against most of them. There are a few where we just can't shore up the sideboard that much. We just don't have it in the mana base. It's just not consistent enough in Standard right now to get there. We also don't have a lot of enablers that I wish we had in Pioneer and Modern, but we'll try and get there with what we've got, and most of the time it just becomes a grindy enough game that people get either frustrated or just can't see a win condition and either drop out, quit, or will timer fuse you. What do you guys want to call that? I don't know, whatever you want to call that. Call it just like laziness. But anyway, I'm climbing the ladder with a bunch of different decks right now. I've chosen 6, if you can't see. I'm sure you can see. I hope. I have to look down to make sure they can. But the one we're going to talk about now is my Pioneer port for Niv Mizzet. So in Magical Christmas Land, the idea for this deck is that on turn 1, we drop a Gilded Goose and a land, right? Turn 2, we drop a Paradise Druid and a land that puts us at 4. And then on turn 3, ultimately, we hopefully, in Magical Christmas World, can drop a Niv Mizzet Reborn. Niv Mizzet Reborn on turn, that's right, 1. I'm going to double check my math here, right? Turn 1, 2, yeah, turn 3. So that's great. If we can get it, it doesn't happen ever. I think think I've had it happen once. If it happens, it's almost an auto concede from the other side. In best of 3, it's just you go to sideboard and go from there. On turn 4, we try to hit casualties of war and start basically taking out their resources. If they have a creature or an early planeswalker on the board, we're destroying them, we're destroying one of their lands, and then we're just keep that up over and over again. Unfortunately, Gilded Goose doesn't enable that unless we're drawing our land drops. So we're running, I believe we're running 26. We might be running 27. Nope, we're running 26 lands in this. It would be great if I could fit a 27th, but I can't really get there. So that's all magical Christmas land. We are just casting these big spells and putting people completely out of the game before they can even get into the game. Now this works really well against almost everything that is in Worlds. Sans red deck wins, but to shore up the matches against red deck wins and to shore up the matches like blue-white control, Temerian Reclamation, fires, everything that's and even Jund to some extent, we are running a bunch of cards that should normally be in sideboards, but we're not putting them in the sideboard. We're putting them in the main deck because we can tutor them up with Niv Mizzet. If we can hit a Niv Mizzet, we can get them. If we can hit a Crisis, we can get them. We can get them and cast them, hopefully, with this mana base without taking too much damage and beat a red deck wins deck. A red deck wins deck? That's just right. A red deck wins before sideboard. And then after sideboard, hopefully we have a better chance. So let's break the deck down real quick, see what's happening, go to the sideboard, see what we can talk about in the sideboard. As always, I'll post this on Stream Decker. The links are down below if you guys need anything. If you found this on YouTube, it's down below. If you got this on some other website, go through YouTube or just look up my username. It's basically the same across the board. There's no underscore in it for the most part, but definitely I've been having success with this, so hopefully you guys can have some success with this as well. So we're running a full 3 copies of Gilded Goose and 4 Paradise Druids. This is our Magic Christmas land on getting turn 3 or 4 Niv Mizzet Reborn and refilling our hand. This doesn't happen all the time. Most of the time the goose gets bolted or stomped. I say bolted, bolt's not in standard. Most of the time it gets stomped or shocked. Really, in general, stomping the goose sounds like something dirty and sexual, but we're not going to go there. Druid we chose because of the hexproof, even though we're going to lose it to a lot of the other cards that we're playing, but because it has hexproof, it can help us out in a lot of situations, and later in the game, it can be something difficult for people to deal with if they're using targeted removal and we can get the last few points of damage in. So it's great in the early game, not so great in the mid game or late game, but it can get us there and great mana fixing. So that's our little tiny mana fix package that we got going on. On top of that, we're running 3 Uro. Uro is great because it gains us life, allows us to draw, can come back later, and can put a second land into play per turn. It gives us ramp, it gives us draw, it gives us light. It should be a 4 of, I think. I don't know what else to cut. The things that I'm running 4 ofs, I don't want to cut the main board. Maybe we can find a spot for a 4th copy in the sideboard, or maybe we just take 1 copy out if mana's not running consistently. So if you guys don't like the way the deck's running, I definitely suggest that you take out whatever you think is not supposed to be in the main board, and definitely try it with a 4th Uro before you do anything, before you change the lands, before you do anything. So that's definitely one of those things where I'm still on the fence about it. I found 3 works really well. I find more than 3, especially in the yard, if I'm trying to pitch later in the game and bring it back, I'm just pitching them away. In our 3 spots, kind of janky and kind of smashed right now. Like it's full, so we don't want to get too much in there. So main deck, we're also running quite a bit of removal. We're running 2 D-Sparks. This is great for hitting Questing Beast, great for hitting Embercleave, and great against fires, where fires, everything is coming down and it's getting haste. We need to be able to interact with that. Game 1, if we can't interact with that, we're kind of boned. And we're not running counter spells because we're not trying to keep things up, like us staying untapped and not playing anything, but waiting for them to do something. It's not good for us. We're not flashing anything into play. We're not doing anything like that. So having a 2-mana instant that can actually interact with something like that is really good. It also hits Torbrad, so it's good against red deck wins. It's just really good against a lot of matchups right now. So we're running 2 main and 2 sideboard. We'll get to sideboard in a little bit here. Other removal that we're running is 2 Unmoored Ego main. I've gone back and forth on running sacrifice effects to take care of Trawler or to take care of oh man, what's the name of that? My mind is like stopping. I mainly put this in here for Trawler, but it hits like everything. Oh, the Jund Engine. It hits Cat Oven combo. It exiles all of them. It exiles Mayhem Devil. It exiles a lot of things that are gonna end up coming back a lot with things like Blue-White Control, where they're running Elspeth Conquers Death. So it just tends to hit a lot of the decks that are in the meta right now. I think it deserves a main board spot simply because it's multicolored and we can get there with it. We can also side it out if it's too slow. At 3, it's kind of clunky. It might just eat a removal, but eating a removal is kind of good for us in some situations, especially game 1. So definitely 2 main board. I've got one more on the side. We'll get to that in a little bit, and we'll talk about the sideboard a little bit more, but that's pretty much why it's there. Deafening Clarion, obviously against red deck wins. It's a lot of other things as well. If you're run into a Gruul deck, a lot of the Gruul decks with haste, it can hit a lot of that stuff. The lifelink becomes very, very relevant in a lot of games. So the fact that it's modular and you can do one both or just kind of sit on it, board it out for something better like Solar Blaze, which we're running a 2-2 split here, is just really good. Solar Blaze is really good against the Gruul mono green and Temur Clovers. It just is an all-star. It does its work again against Jet-Sky Fires. Deafening Clarion really doesn't get there against them, but Solar Blaze can just wipe out. So if they're playing 2, and especially if we have a Teferi on the board, we can play that on their turn after they play both their cards and hopefully just wipe their board, or we can get there the turn after, clear the board, and then just get back into the game. It does take care of our stuff too, so it's kind of hard to justify running too many of them. Post sideboard, we try and bring in at least one Dream Trawler. I believe I only have one Dream Trawler in the board right now, but we try and bring in one Dream Trawler so we gain some life off the Solar Blaze. Our Dream Trawler stays if we can get it. Usually we can off Niv Mizzet, and then we just kind of work our way back into the games over and over again. So that's pretty much our generic removal package, but we are running 4 Casualties of War. Usually with this kind of mana ramp and the mana that we have available, we can start casting this on turn 4, 5, or 6. Obviously turn 6 is the basement for this, right? So we cast it on turn 6. We need double green, double black. So sometimes that's very difficult to get. We have one land in the deck where even during this video, I'm debating cutting it just to get that green and black going a little bit more than anything else. But this is our main removal, and the main reason that I want to play this deck is because I can play all this different removal, have all this variability with Niv Mizzet to get all this removal, and then on top of that play things like Hydroid Krasis, which refill my hand, which actually beat down control, which it's not immune to a counter, but even if they counter it, they're losing a counter. I'm getting the card draw and the life, and hopefully just kind of pushing through. Uro's the same thing. If I activated his ability, I can bring him back. Even if they counter it, I'm trying to just kind of beat that. So when you have decks like Blue-White Control and Temur Reclamation, and even to an extent Fires that come out in Worlds, you tend to run into a lot more control decks. We've seen control for the majority of the decks that are coming out right now. We've seen control and red deck wins, or we're seeing big aggro. mono green aggro, Tamura aggro, where they're running the Clover package, or we're running mono green. So there's aggro and there's control. There hasn't been a mid-range deck that can keep everything in check. Now, you can say to a certain extent Tamura Reclamation and Fires are mid-range decks, or Doom Foretold can be built as a mid-range deck, but we haven't really seen that. We've seen just like a lot of control and aggro, and they're going back and forth on each other. And even here in the finals, I think, I'm not quite sure what's going on because I'm not watching right now, but I know we have one control deck, and you can argue that Jeskai Fires is another control deck once it goes post sideboard to go up against blue-white control. So basically we're control versus control. Now, blue-white Fires, or I'm sorry, Jeskai Fires, tends to be a deck that can switch back and forth. It can switch from an aggressive mid-range deck to a control deck, and that's kind of what we're trying to do here too. But I think we have more tools available than Jeskai Fires, and we can go above and beyond Fires. I've tried this deck with Fires. I don't like it with Fires. You have to put Kenrith in, and you need more haste creatures. So you already put Kenrith, and then you put like Cavaliers in, and then you might as well just be running Jeskai because the mana is better. So I am running a few of those on the sideboard, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But right now, we're just trying to go above and beyond. Now, Niv Mizzet is one of these decks that basically runs like an old school modern Jund deck. It is very much a mid-range deck that's just trying to incrementally increase its advantage against every single deck in the meta. So I'm just basically trying to give myself a leg up against every single deck. Now, it works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. It's also a very expensive deck to craft, so this isn't a silver bullet. It's not going to take down the meta. It's not going to be anything like that. If you guys want to try and take down the meta, take the ladder, make mono red, and just beat face. You're going to get faster decks. You're going to go through more matches than me. You're going to climb the ladder faster than me until you hit diamond. In diamond, you're going to start running into some issues, but then just switch over to the Jeskai Fires, to switch over to something else. If you just want to play meta decks, play meta decks. This is trying to beat all the meta decks and take them by surprise. So when I say that I run 3 or 4 decks to try and climb the ladder, this is my surprise deck. So if I start hitting a lot of decks in the situation where Worlds is happening and all this stuff, they are basically copy pasting from somewhere. I don't know if they're copy pasting from Magic GG, if they're copy pasting from one of the other websites, but the information that they get, the sideboards that they get, really won't help them out as much against me because I'm going kind of a rogue deck route, but at the same time, I'm running all the good cards in the format because I'm 5 color. So sometimes I get there, sometimes I don't. A lot of times it's a grindy deck. Don't think this is going to be a silver bullet and just win everything. And it is a very expensive deck to craft. There's a lot of rares and mythic rares in this deck. Actually, I think, Jesus, most of it is. So don't just craft this deck and think you're going to win everything. Please, 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 if you want to attack the meta, go with your basement bargain red deck wins and just go from there, unless you really want to try and go about it or a different way and just kind of have some fun with it, in which case I suggest you do this, but who knows. Anyway, I think this took down the last 2 or 3 Pioneer tournaments. I'm not sure, and I don't have the stats in front of me. It's also been a huge deck in Modern, but in Modern you have Ren and 6. There's a lot of enablers that we don't have here, so don't feel like this is an exact port. Sideboard wise, we're running a ton of different stuff, mainly to shore up what's going on in Worlds right now, and this may change. Obviously, if you find things that work better, please put them in. Don't feel like this is a copy paste deck where what I say goes. Like, there's so many different options to do, especially because you have availability of 5 colors, like I said, that you can get there with basically anything you put in here. You could put monocolored stuff in here, cut all your Niv Mizzets, and still make a deck that's viable. So please, just take this for what it is. This is what works for me. I've been climbing the ladder with it, and I don't have too many complaints, but this is kind of in flux. there are 2 or 3 flex spots here. Some of the stuff I don't think you should cut, but we can go over all of it. So let's talk about the main decks that are in the finals world right now. PVDDR is running blue-white control. So for blue-white control, we're going to take out 2 Clarions, 2 of our Krasis, 1 Casualties of War, and 1 Solar Blaze. We're going to bring in 2 Ashiok, 2 Vetoes, a single Ego, and a Kenrith. Now the reason that we're cutting our Hydroid Krasis is because his version of the deck and a lot of blue-white versions of the deck are running Narset. So even though if he counters it, we get the ability, a lot of times Narset is sitting on the battlefield and we just gain life off of it. So it makes this a much worse card. So thinking you should keep it in against a counter-heavy deck could be okay or could not be okay. If you see Narset, I suggest you cut this. Casualties of War is slow, and although Mystical Dispute can't hit it for 1, a lot of times when this is coming out, they're going to have something like Dovin's Veto up for 2, and you're just going to get blown out, and it's a situational time walk. You're just kind of getting time walk for playing this, so I got a single one of these out. Solar Blaze doesn't hit as much as we would like against their deck. They are running the Archon. I forget what it is, but it's the Archon that makes Pegasus. Akron. Sungrace. So they're running Archons of Sungrace. So keeping a single one in is okay. It takes care of the tokens. You can take 2 of these out as well. The Clarions don't do anything because all they're running here is Dream Trawler and Archons. So you could just pull all 4 if you want. I bring in a single I bring in a single Kenrith just because of his abilities are being utilized throughout this deck. So we can use basically everything in the deck, right? And a lot of times they can't deal with it. If they can counter it, great. But if they can't counter it, it kind of sits on the battlefield, especially if we can take care of their Ashioks. Or if we have our own Ashiok out, we can just bounce it back to our hand and get the abilities. He's not really what we're using to beat face. He's just using his abilities to be a multifaceted creature and just kind of a pseudo planeswalker. He's a planeswalker that costs mana to activate, basically. So we talked about Ashiok here. We are trying to burn everything out of their graveyard. When they're running Elspeth Conquers Death, they can bring back all their planeswalkers, or 1 at a time, right? But they can bring back a planeswalker. They can bring back a Dream Trawler. So if we're just putting them in the bin, making them discard, it doesn't really do anything. Ashiok coming down and hitting 1 trigger for 5 and then exiling their graveyard is absolutely worth the 3 mana. Same thing with Eagle. If we can get Unboard Eagle and hit either Archon or Trawler, we can get basically an instant concede out of them. A lot of times they don't have anything after that, so they're only running 2 win cons. 50-50 what they're going to win. I've got 2 of these main board and 1 side. So against blue-white control, my first name, obviously, if I pull this early, is going to be Archon of Sungrace. My second name is obviously going to be Dream Trawler. And then after that, it's just a grind matchup. And a lot of times they'll just try and grind you out, even though they don't have a win condition, and you can just beat them down. But the games do go long, so watch your clock. Sometimes they run Ashiok too. The new Ashiok. Oh man, Nightmare Muse, right? Is it Nightmare Muse? So make sure that you can get that 3rd one in there, especially out of the sideboard to go. There's a couple different ways you could sideboard against this. You could bring in your own Dream Trawler because they don't have a lot of ways to deal with it. But I think that just ends up being this unbelievably slow game where you're just beating face. So I think the Unmoored Ego Ashiok plan is much better. I'll in the comments of this, I'll actually put the way that I sideboard. I'll print out the way that I sideboard, and then you guys can see if it works for you or not. Against red deck wins, which is another one that we saw in Worlds a lot, we're taking out mainboard. We're taking out 2 of our unmoored egos. We're taking out a single Niv Mizzet. We're taking out a single Krasis, and then we're taking out 3 of our casualties of war. All those spells are a little bit slow against them. And then we're going to take in some more expensive, same cost spells, but cost spells that basically will shut them out of the game. So we're going to bring in a single Trawler, a single Kenrith, 2 more Clarions, our last Solar Blaze, and then our last 2 D-Sparks. So we're going to run a full set of D-Sparks for Torbrand and Embercleave. We want that haste interaction, the instant speed interaction, because if they're putting the Embercleave on the battlefield, we can lose almost immediately. So we need to be able to interact with that. We also need to be able to keep the board clear, and with Annex, or Anox, however you want to say it, with him on the battlefield, even if they have 6/11s or 5/11s, and then 1 Torbrand, they can take everything out. So we're bringing in a total of 7 board wipes, and I know it's ridiculous, but there's not much else you can do to keep their board completely clear if you're 1-for-1ing them. Things like Jet-Sky Fires can go above and beyond and do it very fast once Fires comes down, and there's not a lot of interaction for red deck and Fires. Now, we're not running Fires, and I think Fires is clunky in this kind of deck, so we're doing the same thing, but we're just wiping the board over and over and over and over again. The one card that does suck and has shown up in Worlds, and I was hoping people would just kind of let it be a sleeper, is Unchained Berserker. He's got protection from white, so with the majority of our removal being from white, you may not want to remove one of your Krasis. You may want to just keep this at 4 and remove your 4th Casualties of War. I like to keep 1 in just in case there's a Conclave hiding somewhere, that they're playing 1 Conclave or something like that, and I just need to take out that artifact or enchantment or whatever they've got on the board. Especially with Teferi on the battlefield, with the way that we can ramp into mana, sometimes I'm playing this on their turn, and they'll slam something like Conclave of Calamities, and they'll do something else before they attack, and then I can just get a ton of shit off the board before they even get all that damage in, and it feels really good. So definitely watch out for the Unchained Berserkers, because that's definitely one thing that our deck has trouble with at this point, because we're running all our board sweeps are all white. Now, Temur Reclamation, it had a good showing. It kind of got knocked out pretty early. It's not one of those decks that is very easy to play, so you probably won't see too much of it on the ladder. You'll see it in very niche patterns where you may see one person play it over and over again. And watch the name of the players, because a lot of times I play the same person 3 or 4 times in an hour, and I have to go back and look at my videos. I'm like, holy, I swear to God, I played this person before, and it will be the same deck and the same person that I've played 3 or 4 times. So Reclamation is relatively difficult for us to deal with. They can get there in a lot of different ways, because basically Reclamation is now Reclamation and Simic Flash mashed into one deck, and they took both decks and they smashed it together, and they do a really good job of both, of being the Flash deck and of being Reclamation, which is really hard for I think anybody to deal with except for blue-white control, and to an extent Jet-Sky Fires, because you can bring in enough removal in the form of counter spells and things like that. Here we're not relying on counter spells, we're actually relying on unmoored egos to actually strip them of everything they need. However, we are still extremely susceptible to their counter spells, so it's about 50-50 in this matchup. Sometimes it just feels like they blow us out of the water and we're just waiting for them to win, and sometimes it feels like we are just basically stuffing their Reclamations right back down their throats and laughing at them as they get nothing on the board. So that being said, the way that I usually board against this is I take out 2 Niv Mizzet Reborn. He's worse because they can bring in the Mystical Disputes if they don't already have a main board. So if we're at 5 and they just counter it for 1, it feels really bad. We take out 2 Deafening Clarions. They don't have a lot that we can hit. If they are running the Night Pack Ambusher, Clarion doesn't really get us there. It doesn't actually kill the Nightpack Ambusher itself. So even though it kills all the tokens, doesn't really matter. If they're running the Ooze package, that's great. If we get it the turn after they play Ooze and they haven't untapped to make another Ooze, or they haven't somehow like gotten another counter on everything, which I've seen a certain amount of proliferate in these decks. So just kind of watch out for that too. So I take out 2 Deafening Clarions. I take out 2 Casualties of War, which may or may not be a mistake. It depends on the build, because this does hit Artifact, Feature, Enchantment, Land, Planeswalker, right? So if they are ahead on the board, this can bring us back. But if they're behind on the board, this is kind of a crappy draw. Because if they're behind on the board, sometimes this is destroy a land for 6 mana, which doesn't really do much for us. And then I pull 1 Krasis or 1 Solar Blaze, and it's hit or miss on what they're building. If they're building around Nightpack, are they building around War Boss? Are they running Niv Mizzet Perun? Niv Mizzet Perun, if Perun, if it comes down, that thing is brutal and it's got to be removed immediately. It cannot stay on the battlefield whatsoever. So we got to make sure that we have enough D-Sparks to take care of it, because again, we're not running that many counter spells. So I take out 2 Niv, 2 Deafening, 2 War, and a single Krasis usually. I bring in 2 Ashiok because it'll take care of their Uros. It'll pitch them, plus 5 other cards, hopefully, at least once. Even if it just triggers once, seriously, it's worth the 3 mana if it just triggers once. The last Unmoored Ego, so I run 3 Unmoored Ego against that, and then for Unmoored Ego, I'm hitting Expansion, Explosion, Reclamation, or I'm hitting Niv if I know they have Niv, or Nightmare, Uro, depends on what I kind of see there, but having 3 copies really does help out. Then I'm bringing in my last 2 D-Sparks, so I have a full set of D-Sparks. It can hit Reclamation, it can hit Nightpack Ambushers, it can hit Reclamation, I already say it, Reclamation, Nightpack, Niv. It can hit a ton of stuff, and there are some things that they can come underneath. If you're playing against a War Boss deck, I suggest that you don't bring in too many of them. Maybe 3, and then even in my sideboard, I'm running a single Assassin's Trophy. It's a catch-all. It takes care of troublesome lands. It takes care of a lot of things. Like if they're scrying all the time because of this, I can take out their castle and make them not scry. Yeah, they get another land, but that scry is really important sometimes. I wish I could fit another Assassin's Trophy in here, but again, when we're running as many Casualties of War as we are, I think a single one is okay. So anyway, play the deck for what it is, but definitely use your Unmoored Ego based on what they're playing. Take out the Expansion Explosions first. Reclamation isn't as troublesome once those are gone. Then take out the Reclamations if you can land a second one, and then after that, pick them apart. Basically, our deck should win after that once Expansion Explosion is gone, but you never know. They could have some other tech that I'm not really thinking of and hasn't come up in Worlds, because right now we're just trying to make this deck against Worlds meta. So we're trying to fight the meta post Worlds. Fires, Jeskai Fires, that's the next deck we're going to talk about here. This deck is actually really hard to beat. It is hands down probably the most difficult deck to beat in this meta. If you get a turn 4 Fires or a turn 3 Fires, I've seen a few that are running Monoramp. By that I mean they're not running Jeskai, they're running green in there, and they're running 4 color. And all of a sudden you get a Fires on turn 2, 3, 4, or 5. Obviously it can't happen on turn 2. I'm just pulling that out of my ass, but on 3 or 4, on turn 5, if they're dropping a Kenrith and or a Cavalier, it's really hard to deal with. It's really hard to deal with any deck. I don't care what deck you are. You can get blue-white out if you're running blue-white, and you can start bouncing with Teferi, or you can start exiling somehow. It works really well, but if you don't draw those exact cards, you're kind of boned. Now you could just run a pile of counter spells like a blue-white control deck does, and just keep jamming in a bunch of counter spells, and then hopefully get like Archons in and Dream Trawler in, and just as they're beating your face, you're gaining enough life that it doesn't matter. It seems like a really poor idea to me. It seems to be working in Worlds for the most part, but it seems like a poor idea to me. I like to have more ways available to deal with these things. So we have a lot of main deck to deal with them. We hopefully can tempo them out with the Fury. We've got 2 main deck Unmoored Ego. We have Solar Blaze, which if Fury is out, we can Solar Blaze on their turn. We're running 2 D-Sparks, so we can get rid of either the fires, or we can get rid of whatever they play off the fires and just exile it completely so they can't bring it back off Elspeth Conquers Death. And then the 4 casualties should get us there. If they don't, and we go to sideboard, even if we win the first game, we go to sideboard. I usually take out 2 Clarions. They don't hit a lot. And 2 Niv Mizzet. The reason I take out the Niv Mizzet here, the reason I take out the Niv Mizzet here as opposed to the Hydrate Crisis is they do tend to bring in a lot of counterspells. The counterspells that they're bringing in, I'd rather draw the cards than not draw the cards, right? They usually don't run Narset. If they're running Narset, keep the Niv Mizzets and take out the Hydrate Crisis. That's the best advice I can give you. If you see a Narset, ditch the Crisis. If you don't see a Narset, ditch the Niv Mizzet, because it's either one or the other. They're either running a ton of counter spells or they're running a ton of Narsets, and they're just trying to get there and get the advantage from you. So yeah, -2 Niv Mizzet, -2 Deafening Clarions. Usually bring in 2 more D-Spark because we want the interaction, the fast interaction. Another Solar Blaze. So that works really well. And then our last Unmoored Ego from the sideboard. So Unmoored Ego, the last Solar Blaze, and then the last 2 D-Sparks. You can bring in Vetoes if you feel like they're going to help you out in the match. I find them to be a little bit slow because, again, we're not trying to hold up mana like Temur Reclamation. So having too many counterspells doesn't really do much for us. And a lot of things that we're going to want to counter from them post-board are going to be creatures. So it really doesn't help us too much. You can always bring in a single Trawler, which they have an extremely hard time to deal with. There's no sacrifice effects that they run. And landing one of these can ultimately just shut out the game. So you kind of have to play it by what their build is. And whatever their build is, you just kind of put in what you think they can't take care of. Again, we're trying to shore up our matchups here. We're not trying to make the deck so amazing that nothing can beat it, but what we're trying to do is make our deck better against that certain matchup. So the single Dream Trawler coming in that we can find with Niv Mizzet, if we're not pulling those Niv Mizzets out, and we pulled out our Hydrate Crisis, we put this guy in, and then bam, we find him, crap, we can just take over a game. We can keep refilling our hand a lot of times. We can keep pitching. They can't really do much about it, and we just run away with everything. So that's something to think about, definitely. As far as fires and the ego targets, definitely hit Trawler first or Kenrith, whichever one you see. A lot of times they don't run both, but if you think they're running both, I would say hit Trawler first and then Kenrith. Kenrith is easier for us to deal with. We can usually chump him, or we can get him out with the Solar Blaze. With Dream Trawler, we can't get it out with the Solar Blaze, and even if we do trump it, they're still gaining cards, they're still drawing cards, and they're still gaining life, so we don't necessarily want that. You also have to remember they run Cavalier of Gales. Cavalier of Gales, our Solar Flare will take care of, but it'll put back in the library. So our Unmoored Ego is eventually going to have to get out whatever amount of Cavalier of Gales they have. Otherwise, they're just going to win. So we need this to exile them pronto. If we're seeing multiples of them, I've seen decks that run 1, I've seen decks that run 4. So my order of getting things out of the way is always Dream Trawler, Kenrith, Cavalier of Gales. Then anything else that you can get rid of, great. But those are my 3 main Unmoored Ego targets. So that's what I'm hitting there. And again, I'll put this in the comments. So if you guys don't remember, or you don't remember this little part of the video and want to try out this deck, I promise I'll print it all out for you. Let's see what else is in Worlds right now. Jund made a little bit of a showing. There was one single Jund deck, Piotr. I'm always going to mess up his name. His name's Peter, but it's Piotr Grogolski. I can't remember. Jund is not a very fun matchup for us. We do have some ability to take care of what they have going on, but I haven't seen a lot of it lately, and it's a relatively expensive deck to craft, so I don't think a lot of people are going to be crafting it when it did poorly at Worlds, so I don't think you're going to see too much of it. That being said, we have the Unmoored Egots to take care of it and the Ashiok Dream Renders. So when we're playing against Jund, we're going to take out a single Solar Blaze, we're going to take out a single Krasis, we're going to take out 3 Teferi. Teferi, if they have the Oven and the Cat on board, and we're trying to bounce something of theirs and they're just sacrificing it, not only do we not get the card draw, we kind of lose tempo there instead of gaining tempo. So Teferi is not very good against them, in my opinion. You can have another opinion, and if you do, just leave the comments down below, or let me know however else, comments wherever you find this posted, on Twitch or YouTube or whatever. Just let me know what you think. But I think Teferi is pretty poor against it, and I take out a single Niv Mizzet. I keep in all my Casualties of War because it can hit everything that they're doing, and I think it's one of the best cards that we have against them next to Unmoored Ego and Ashiok. So we want to run as close to a full playset of all of those as possible. So against Jund, we are taking out, like I said, a single Solar Blaze, a single Krasis, 3 of our Teferis, and a single Niv Mizzet Reborn. And then we're going to bring in 2 Ashioks, a single Unmoored Ego, 2 more D-Sparks. The Exile on D-Spark is amazing, and a lot of times these decks are running not only Corvold, but they're also running like, oh, I'm going to forget the name of it now. Nightmare. The new Nightmare creature, where if something else dies, it's a 1/1. Man, I'm forgetting the name of it right now. I'm going to look it up. Everybody laugh at me as I cannot remember. Nightmare Shepherd. Nightmare Shepherd. There we go. So they're running Nightmare Shepherd, which D-Spark takes care of. So we're trying to hit Cat Oven, Corvold, Nightmare Shepherd. There's usually only one Bantu. So, but if there's one Bantu and they keep coming back and they don't overdo it, sometimes I've seen decks like overdo it, right? They'll bring Bantu on the battlefield and get you down to 1 by sacrificing everything, and you just D-Spark them, and then they're at 1 land and they just concede. But Corvold is something that we automatically have to deal with, and we need this instant speed removal. So things like Krasis, Teferi, Niv Mizzet, even Solar Blaze, they're not instant speed. We need to make sure that we have the instant speed. And then in my flex spot, in my sideboard, again, I'm running this Assassin's Trophy, which I know it gives them a land early on, but sometimes that land is enough tempo, like destroying whatever they have to get our land. It's enough tempo to get back in the game. So I'm not so sure on that one, but it definitely it gets me there a lot. I don't suggest you bring in Dream Trawler or Kenrith. A lot of these builds have been running Plague Crafter and Garth's Rampage. So you're putting a creature down on the battlefield. You want to make sure it does something the turn it comes into play. You want a Niv Mizzet coming down, refilling your hand. You want a Krasis entering the battlefield as a big ass Krasis, refilling your hand and gaining new life. You don't want a Dream Trawler. You don't want Kenrith. You don't want something that's going to enter the battlefield and just sit around, and then they're going to make you sacrifice, and it's not going to work out. Now, the other 2 things since Worlds got announced that I've been running into in the latter is Doom Foretold decks. Doom Foretold is good. I really like Doom Foretold. I'm not going to lie. I've been trying to build a Mardu version of it, and I've got quite a few different Mardu versions of it. I think the Esper version of it is quite weak, but I think the Mardu version of it is quite strong, depending on how you build it. So we can talk about that in a different video. Against Esper or Mardu, we take out 2 Krasis. Go back to our deck. We take out 2 Krasis. We're taking out both our Deafening Clarions, and we're taking out both our Solar Blazes. They don't run enough creatures for us to run a board wipe in general. The versions that I'm running run Archon, So if you are running into a Mardu version that is running Archon, you obviously want to leave in some type of board wipe in case that hits the battlefield. And my suggestion is that you leave in the Deafening Clarions. Solar Blaze does not take care of the Archon itself, and either does Deafening Clarion, but Deafening Clarion having 2 modes costing 1 less is obviously much better. And then we're definitely bringing in 2 Tamios. Go back to the sideboard real quick. We're bringing in 2 Tamios. You can tell I've been running into this enough that I'm running 2 Tamios in my sideboard. We're bringing in a single Eagle, especially against the Esper versions of it. The Esper versions are obviously running Dance of the Mance, and we want to be able to take Dance of the Pants Mance out of the freaking deck and just be done with it. So once you take that out, you kind of, if you can hit anything else with another Unmoored Ego from the main board, like if you hit Doom Foretold or Dance on the Mance against an Esper, if either one of those resolve, you win the game usually. Now the Mardu version, at least my Mardu version, runs a lot more variable win conditions. I run Bantus, I run Archons. I'm running a lot more variation there to make sure that I can get there without something like Unmoored Ego hitting, the key points of my deck. A lot of the decks that I'm running right now, Unmoored Ego completely destroys them. And I think it's one of those cards that people just are sitting on like, yeah, it should be good, it should be good. It's a little expensive, it's a little clunky. If you can make it work in a deck, it shuts down so many archetypes that it's absolutely worth putting into a deck no matter what. The new Ashiok Nightmare Muse, the 5-cost one. I've thought about putting a single one in the sideboard as well. He can get me there, but again, he's a really slow addition that you would kind of want to put into a Dimir control or an Esper control, and I don't think he really has a place in this deck, but you guys may want to think about it here. Against the Esper version as well, you got to make sure that you name Trawler. Even if you haven't seen it, sometimes they're running a single Trawler or 2, and we have no way to deal with Trawler unless we Unmoored Ego it. So if they're running Esper Doom and you go to sideboard and you haven't seen a Trawler, sometimes it's worth it just to say Trawler. If you pull their Trawlers, they'll insta-quit. The other thing is Liliana, Dreadhorde General. They run 1 or 2 of her. Again, it's a sacrifice effect, so Tamiyo really helps, but even getting the card draw and the token on the battlefield can be really obnoxious, so using Unmoored Ego against her is really good. Yeah, so that's pretty much Doom. I mean, there's always some flex there, and do what you feel right. You can always bring in things that you feel suit your needs better against the deck. Doan's Veto is going to counter them. D-Spark's going to hit their Doom Foretold. Assassin Trophy's going to hit the Troublesome Lands. Ashiok's going to rip the things out of there. Unmoored Ego is going to take care of anything that you can't see. Tamiyo's there. Kenrith has some reach on it. I mean, there's just a lot of things that we can do with the sideboard. So our sideboard against things like Doom feels really strong. Lastly, and I'm going to group all 3 of these together because this video is kind of going a little bit long here. Lastly, the things that I've been hitting on ladder are Gruul. Obviously, it's either Gruul Adventure, Gruul Beatdown, which sometimes runs Clothies, sometimes doesn't. If it runs Clothies, I actually have a harder time against it. Not gonna lie, it's that last 2 damage that they're constantly getting through while I'm trying to stabilize sometimes just pushes me over the edge if it's Clothies. Or the Phoenix. The Phoenix, I think, is easier for us to deal with because we have more ways to exile it. However, it gets under D-Spark, which is really obnoxious for us because we are banking on D-Spark as our exile here. D-Spark and Unmoored Ego. And then we're running mono green, big mono green, which is another thing that's very difficult. After a couple of turns, things like Pelt Collectors can get out of range of Deafening Clarions. Even Solar Blaze coming in might be too late. That 1 turn may be enough to shift too late, and then next turn they're dropping in Questing Beast, and we're just done for. And then Tamir Clover and Tamir Beats. I've seen Tamir Clover a couple times where they're running the wish board and all kinds of other things, which is crazy if they're running Fae of Wishes. I really wish Ashiok would be controller can't search, but can't search their library is bad enough. So if they're bringing in that wish board, it's really hard to deal with Tamir Clovers. I don't know how much you're going to see. I know there have been some posts about it recently online. A lot of people have been posting the deck, and I know it's been sitting around the top 5 to 10% of Mythic. And there have been a lot of decks there because it's not a very expensive deck to craft. So if you do run into it, I don't know. I haven't had too much luck against it. Again, I think that's probably our worst, hands down, our worst matchup, but I don't run into too much of it, so I'm not too worried about it. So against these big decks, I take out, obviously, we're talking about big decks. Now they are running some type of ramp. Usually they're running Paradise Druids or something that we can take out with our Deafening Clarions. That usually takes out our ramp too, but I find it to be the right play. So if they're on the play and they go turn 1 birds, I go turn 1 birds, and then they go turn 2 Paradise Druid, and I go turn 2 Paradise Druid, and then sometimes turn 3 they're like, all right, screw this, Pelt Collector, and I don't know, something else, and then they get a bunch of 1, 2, or 3 drops. I'm gonna lose my ramp by doing it, but I'll just Deafening Clarion, or on turn 3 if they only have a Paradise Druid on field. It's a very expensive Lightning Bolt, but I'll Deafening Clarion to get them off there. It's always Bolt the Bird, Stomp the Goose. My favorite new sexual position, Stomp the Goose. No, jokes aside, get rid of their mono ramp as fast as you can. If they get the Clovers out, good luck. I don't know what to tell you besides good luck. We don't have a lot to take care of Clovers. I've gone back and forth on putting in Night of Autumns because I think they would be really good against that. And if you do run into a lot of Tamir, I would suggest that you adjust your sideboard or your main board to run X amount of Night of Autumns. And at certain points when I've been running into it, I've been running 4 Nights of Autumns main board, and I'll cut out my Deafening Clarions or my Solar Blazes or adjust it so I bring in 1 or 2. Cindervines can work, so those are the 2 cards that you guys really should be looking at if you're running into the Tamir Clovers, to get rid of those Clovers. And the same thing with Jund, because if they're getting those ovens on the battlefield, you gotta get rid of them. And sometimes our artifact removal is just a little bit too slow. Yeah, so usually I take out 2 Niv Mizzet, 1 War, Casualties of War, sorry, 2 Teferi, depending on the matchup. Sometimes Teferi is really good, like if they're going ramping into a Questing Beast, you're just going to lose it, right? So against Gruul, most of the time Teferi just is pay 3 mana, draw a card. It doesn't bounce anything because they'll have something like a Paradise Druid in play, and you don't really get to do anything with it. So Teferi seems pretty poor to me here. So I'll bring in Solar Blaze, and then I usually bring in D-Sparks because I can exile all the fast creatures. A lot of things that they want are the 4 drops, especially in Gruul. They're either trying to drop an Evercleave early, or they're trying to drop a Questing Beast early. So we're trying to use D-Spark so we can stabilize before that stuff happens. And then if we stabilize on turn 4 or 5 and get to turn 6, we usually take over the game. Usually, but D-Spark really helps us there. And then I bring in either a Kenrith or a Trawler. Kenrith is the same thing. Like sometimes I bring it against red deck wins. It's something they just can't beat. When you get it on the battlefield and untap with it, and you're gaining 5 to 10 mana a turn, you're just winning. It's just win more card in some situations. But it's also, I stabilize, give me a couple more turns, and now I'm dropping my Niv Mizzet, I'm refilling my hand, and you've got 2 cards left in your hand. Cool, bring it, and then we'll just take care of everything. So that's my take on Gruul, Mono Green, or Tamir. Again, I haven't seen too many of them, but I do struggle with Tamir. I'm not going to lie on that one at all. So that's the deck, guys. This deck tech went really long. I didn't mean for it to go so long, but we're already at about an hour of me talking about this deck. I think this deck is one of the sleepers coming into the meta post Worlds, where everybody is playing what we know they're going to play, right? Everybody is basically playing one of these decks, right? Piotr Blogoski. I'm never going to be able to pronounce that. I love how even Paulo's name, they just put PVDDR. They're like, I can't fit all of that right there. Like, he's the one that gets the abbreviation. I'm going to laugh if I finish this video and he actually won everything, because, yeah, that's just kind of funny. Paulo's one of my favorite characters. One of my favorite players. So, Paulo, you go, boy. Win it for me. But yeah, so we are looking at this as our meta, at least going forward for a while, until somebody comes up with something else. And I think Niv Mizzet, 5-color Niv Mizzet without fires. Fires is too clunky, and if you're going to run fires, just run Jet Sky Fires, because holy crap, it's a great deck. But yeah, we're trying to attack the meta from a bunch of different angles. I think this is the deck to go about it. Again, it's not cheap to craft, but if you got the cards lying around and want to give it a shot, do it. I think you won't regret it. I'm doing quite well climbing the ladder with it. As always, guys, if you're climbing the ladder, I suggest that you build multiple decks as well. I am not running a red deck, but most of the time I do run an aggro deck. I am running a Mardu deck, a Bant deck, Junsack, and then my Niv port. I also have Bant Ramp and Sultai Yard. These are the decks that I'm running the ladder with. If you see that you can't win against what you're playing against, and that happens a lot to me in ladder, I'll be playing, like, I'll play the Niv Mizzet deck, and I'll run against 7 red deck wins, 1 blue right control, and then 2, I don't know, like Gruul. I will switch decks because Niv, off the bat, does not have a great matchup against those, and I'll switch to something that does. Something with a lot more board wipes, something like my Mardu deck, and it just keeps changing it up to the point where I don't get frustrated with climbing the ladder. So if you guys haven't figured out how to not get tilted while you're climbing the ladder, I suggest you make a couple different decks if you're actually serious about climbing the ladder. I, unfortunately, am not serious about climbing any of the standard ladder. Standard gets so boring to me. I make decks like Niv Mizzet, Pioneer Port, and Mardoom, Sack Menace, which, if any of you watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, you will know this from Chardy's Matt Dennis, The Game of Games. But anyway, neither here nor there. Give it a shot. Let me know what you think. The deck list will be posted below. Any post that I put this in, I will try and write up the matchup as well. You guys can check me out on Twitch. It's my username, Tarquinius Rex. On Reddit, I'm Tarquinius Rex _ or Tarquinius _ Rex. YouTube is Tarquinius Rex MTG. I'm on EtherHub as Tarquinius Rex, and you can always check out my Stream Decker page. I'm always coming up with new stuff to try and mess with the meta in Standard, but I'm just waiting for Historic to come back, because honestly, I don't want to see myself playing against this for how many more months? Wait, that's Sebastian. Yeah, I don't like it. But anyway, guys, good luck, have fun, thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any comments, questions, anything. You can always hit me up. Cheers, aloha, home state. I'm glad you guys came to play some Magic.